Welcome to Disciples in the Shed. We're going to head into the shed in a moment. Tonight we've got a great program. We've got Emily Isham, who's a GP from southern Tasmania, a really powerful story of how to be the church in these times. We've got Ben Connelly, who trains pastors, how to be on mission. Ben's from Texas, and he's got a great insight into how to be the church in these times. We've also got Joel Kettleton with us, who's going to help us to unpack the Bible a little bit. Let's head on into the shed for our first song.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every song we could ever sing. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. You are worthy of every song we could ever sing. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And you are holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. You are worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And you are holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my Yeah, Jesus, that's what we pray, that you will leave us, that you will lead us in your love to those around us, and that we, through your love, can love others as you love them. That as we look to you and as we look to you and how worthy you are and how holy you are, you can just reflect that on others. Yeah, it's my prayer. Amen.
It's great to be with you today. We've got a bunch of people that we're going to chat with today around what does it look like to be the church in these times. So we're going to start with some introductions. We've got Joel and Emily and Ben with us. Guys, can we just do some quick introductions? We'll start with you, Joel.
Hello, I'm Joel Kettleton, and I am the rector of the Anglican parish of Saturate, Richmond and Tasman, which is a group of churches in the southeast of Tasmania.
Great, thanks, Joel. And Emily, you're a doctor and you're from down in the south of Tassie.
Yep.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep, I work down from home part-time because I have children at home as well, and going into this current climate, we've also got our children home from school, so that makes things a bit different, but live in Kingston and work for Rare Cancers Australia and a skin cancer clinic.
Excellent. Thanks, Emily. Great to have you with us. Ben, you're a little bit further away in the States. Tell us about where you're from and tell us a little bit about your role.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name is Ben Connelly, and I live in Fort Worth, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas. So yes, it is a bit of a jaunt to get to you guys. It's tomorrow where you are, so I'm glad to be here. I'm director of training for a group called Saturate. We're part of the Soma family of churches. I planted a church about 10 years ago, have been in pastoral ministry for about 20 years. And this past year, transitioned into a role trying to train everyday disciples and church planters.
Yeah, excellent. Great to have you with us, Ben. Hey, Ben, can we start with you and just tell us what things are like in the States right now? How are people feeling?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a loaded question. It depends on the person and probably the moment of the day as to how people are feeling. I think there's a lot of uncertainty still, and less uncertainty maybe about the reality or the danger of this virus and this season. I think for a while, I'd love to hear what you're experiencing in Tassie as well, but for a little while there was uncertainty of, is this really a thing? Is it a big deal? Do we need to be worried about it? I think that's gone. But now it's kind of the question of, who do we trust? There's so much information coming from every corner of the internet, and medical experts and quote unquote political experts and different, right today as we're recording this, the big debate is who gets to open the country again. Is it the president or the governor is deciding? And so there's just a lot of uncertainty. Even watching the back and forth, a lot of people being asked to put their hope, frankly, if I can spiritualize it a little bit, in a lot of places that are going to let them down, no matter what the answer is.
Yeah, I think we've seen that a bit in Australia as well. Hey, Joel, speaking of hope, Sunday we dug into the historical account of the resurrection in John 20. Tell us a little bit about what we pulled out of that on Sunday.
So, Jamie, your main point was that the resurrection changes everything, which is the pivotal thing about the Christian faith, right?
Yeah.
And so we looked at when Jesus rose from the dead and he appeared to the people on that first day, the different reactions. And so the way that Mary and Thomas and the other disciples, is that right? They're the three groups?
Yeah.
Good. I remembered how they interacted with the risen Jesus actually is quite comforting for us. And we see their humanity butt up against something quite amazing, you know, the supernatural resurrection of Jesus and how that changes all reality and how people reacted with that. And coming out of that, I think what you were trying to emphasize and what we get out of it as Christians is that we get hope out of the resurrection. And that is, I keep saying it's our most precious commodity as Christians. We have hope, which sees us through difficult times, but it sees us through eternity as well.
Yeah.
So that's what we looked at.
Yeah, it's really powerful. It's a powerful message, isn't it? And look, let's use that theme of hope. I think one of the things that we're noticing a lot is that people are kind of almost as if the statements are, I can't wait to be the church again. I can't wait to be back at church again, as if church is something that's on hold right now. Now, I think we know that's not true. But the question I have then, and we'll start with you, Ben, is how do we be the church in these times? How do we continue to be that presence of Jesus in our communities and in our countries and in the world?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that's what we all need to be figuring out. And this is true of church leaders. This is true of, group leaders or community leaders. And this is true of the everyday follower of Jesus. It's interesting, in a lot of our churches, we hear about the priesthood of believers. We believe that we all have the Spirit of God indwelling us, this kind of thing. And yet our default in kind of normal times, if we can compare right now to normal time, is to even well-meaning folks will do our part. We'll serve the church. We'll try to meet a neighbor here or there, this kind of stuff. But a lot of the busyness of everyday life takes over, and so a lot of the ministry, a lot of the mission seems to fall back to the clergy, to the rectors, to the pastors. And I think one thing that we're seeing in our own church and across the states is followers of Jesus saying, "Oh, I do have a vital role to play here." If the life of a Christian, way oversimplified, kind of, but is hear and obey, right? Hear and obey the word of the Lord, hear and obey the Spirit as He leads. That has certainly not gone away just because we can't meet on Sundays. And so finding creative ways to serve or, stand several feet away from people, but still engage, or even what we're doing right now. It's interesting. I was on a call earlier today and one of the pastors on the call said, I think I've actually looked more people in the eye in these last few weeks. It's been over a Zoom or virtually or whatever, but I've looked more people in the eye for longer conversations than I have in many given weeks. And so I'm already going too long, but from pastors actually, picking up the phone and calling some of their folks in their congregation, like the old house calls that happened a generation ago. A virtual house call can happen right now to the everyday Christian going, how can I serve the person who is unable to serve themselves? How can I truly believe that I'm a priest representing God to people and representing people to God? I think people are kind of stepping up and wanting to hear and obey.
Yeah, totally. That's fantastic. Thanks, Ben. Emily, tell us a little bit about your situation and your context and what insights you can give us to being the church in these times.
Well, I guess I speak from a few different perspectives. And I'll just go through them now. I'm a GP, so I have had and I've had a lot of mental health training. So I've had many years of dealing with people as they come to me, often in the depths of despair or dealing with major disadvantage or upheavals or disappointments in their lives. Some are in dangerous situations. Some are in situations that it's impossible to see an end to. And it's my job to be with that person in that moment. And at the moment, having walked a lot of these people through mental health rehabilitation in some ways, but even just walking alongside them as they get through each day, not necessarily healing, but but helping them get through each day, we use tools. And a lot of those tools now, a lot of those pillars of mental health rehabilitation have been taken away from us, out of our control now. So things like having a routine and a structure. Well, many people have lost their jobs and are working from home now, if they are still working. And so there is no routine and structure. It's chaos often at home, especially for people with dependents there in that workspace. They haven't got the space to deal with the emotions of work because their kids are watching them. Things like regular exercise, a lot of those groups, the gyms are closed, a lot of the personal training groups, the boot camps, the walking groups, running groups, they've stopped now. So people don't have access to things like that. People don't have as much access to fresh fruit and vegetables, which is helpful in maintaining some sense of well-being. And people don't have the community, the face-to-face at church, the face-to-face at work, even just talking to people in the corridor, even if there is no depth to that conversation, breaks up the day a little bit. And when days run into days, which run into the next day, you know, it's just so sometimes disheartening for people. So I speak from that angle because I see how it's going to be really difficult for people to motivate themselves out of this space, but also the long-term implications of this lockdown and the threat to people's health and well-being is long-term. And we're going to see the consequences of that for years to come. The other angles are that I actually grew up as a missionary child in Democratic Republic of Congo. My parents were missionaries, and we grew up right on the border with Rwanda during the genocide. And I was a child amongst the UNHCR refugee camps and saw my parents working alongside them, feeding and clothing and sheltering these refugees. And I want to put this in because it offers some perspective that whilst in Australia, and I add the disclaimer that not all of us in Australia have safe, stable homes, but we do have homes. The majority of us do have homes, and there is privilege in that. And I don't think we quite understand the privilege of being able to lock down as a wider society. I've been listening to reports from back home, from Congo, and basically they're saying just lock down the elderly over 60 because there is, and everyone needs to sew their own masks. That's all they can do. That's all they can do as a government. And to be able to have the privilege of locking down is something that I don't think we quite realise. In a first world country, this is particularly anxiety provoking, I think, because we never think that there is going to be a threat on our health because, you know, we've got access to everything. We've got good resources. We've got expert care in so many fields, and people are looking for answers and ways out of this because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to have freedoms taken away in a country where everything's available.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to realise that, you know, we are fallible, even if we are in a first world country. And then sort of just coming to the other perspectives, my husband and I have had 4 children, and our second one, Ned, was diagnosed with leukemia in 2014, and he was battling that for nearly 5 years through 2 relapses. We needed to go to Melbourne for 2 bone marrow transplants at 2 separate times. And in between that, we went to Seattle for a clinical trial for 3 months. And he kept relapsing. And there was a point in Seattle that we were supposed to put him through the treatment, knowing that he probably wouldn't survive. We were away from all our family and friends, and he was given a very poor prognosis. And we had to take that leap of faith, knowing that we valued quality of life, so we wanted to bring him back to Tasmania, but also knowing that God had taken us to Seattle, and we had no guidance in that. And then, of course, again, through both bone marrow transplants, where we were essentially like we are now, locked down in isolation, but in a bone marrow transplant room. And he was only allowed one parent at a time. His siblings weren't allowed in. And we did that for 5-6 months at one point, and the other one was 2 months. So I've lived this. I've lived this with the threat of my son's life for months, and it's grueling. It's grueling. But the way I got through it is by simply looking to Jesus and doing it one moment at a time, because I know that Jesus will give me the strength I need to get through each moment, even if that's a really terrible moment. I don't have to look ahead. I don't need to know if he's going to die next week or in a year. And that's how, he was given the last relapse in February last year, and 5 weeks later he died in my arms, and just before his 7th birthday. And I didn't know when that moment would come, but I just had to trust each moment to God. And there really is, I've been looking extensively at Mary in my studies at Ridley recently, and realizing that we look at the Christmas narrative as a whole story, and it's like got this kind of happy ending, the baby's born, and now it's all really nice to look back on as a really happy story. But we don't actually look at that 9 months that Mary was pregnant and think about how she got through each moment, because it wouldn't have been easy. We look at it and say, oh, there's a great outcome, we need to look to God during this time, but we don't actually think of what that comprises of getting through each moment, of her being pregnant in a community that probably didn't accept that she was in, it was a virgin conception, and there was shame in that, that she, we don't know what her marriage with Joseph was like. We don't know if she had supports around her. We don't know how exhausted she was, if they were worried about finances. We don't know, but it didn't sound like it was easy. And we really need to realize that she endured that moment by moment and came out with showed incredible humility and incredible trust through that whole process. But it wouldn't have been easy. And I think we need to look to her and other people in the Bible to realize that going through hardship moment by moment isn't let's look in retrospect and we came out the other side. It's actually trying to endure each moment at the time, and that's what we're in at the moment. People are finding it remarkably hard to get through each day, and I just want to urge you to realize that this is an imperative part. For one thing, it's an imperative part of public health to protect those who cannot protect themselves. But for another thing, if you just look to Jesus for that hope each moment, then there will be a moment when it's all over, and we'll be able to look in retrospect and be like the Christmas story, not necessarily the happy ending, but at the same time it will be a bigger story. But we will know that we got through each moment looking to Jesus, and that's the example we want to set, in our homes. If we want to be the church in our homes, that's what we want to show the people who live with us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really powerful, Emily, and thank you for sharing that. Ben, how do we point people to Jesus in this time? How do we encourage people to be community in this time? And how do we help them to see that it's important what we do now to prepare for the end? Like Emily said, we will get through this. How do we prepare people now for when we come out of this?
Yeah. Hey, Emily, that is the faith and hope that you just shared is really, really helpful. And thank you. That was encouraging and helpful for me, and I know it's going to be for others listening to this. I've thought similarly about Joseph in the Old Testament. We have the verse that we get to point to and say, of course, what man intended for evil, God intended for good. And we have the story of him being made second in charge of Egypt, and everything looks pretty in the end. But I've thought often, we've talked with some of our folks in our church about, like, what did it look like the day before Pharaoh's servant remembered him in prison? Like he had gone through all of this with brothers, and then with Potiphar and his wife, and he had even told, you know, the butler and baker, here's the dreams that are being interpreted, and when one of you gets out, remember me to Pharaoh, and there's my hope. And then he was forgotten again. And what did he think the day before? He didn't know that he was going to get released from prison and all that kind of stuff. But the faithfulness to get through every day is something similar to what you said about Mary, that I think is a model for all of us. And so you're right, we see it throughout the scriptures. And I think that one thing in first world nations is we forget that the majority of history, God's people have existed with some sort of suffering. There was not a New Testament command, love one another, serve one another, bear each other's burdens, be joyful in each other's joys, find peace that surpasses understanding. There weren't examples in the New Testament outside of the fact that Christians were being persecuted and were suffering. And it's only because kind of the relative comfort that we found that these things seem strange to us. How many of the Psalms are David calling out saying, God, where are you? Raise me out of this pit. I don't even know you. Have you forgotten me? And so I think that there's a place of looking to the scriptures and finding hope that can then, to your question, Jamie, translate into kind of the reality of we have an opportunity right now to live out a lot of Christian commands that seem foreign to us, but were not foreign to the original recipients of the Old and New Testaments. It almost, and in some veins of theology, this is stronger than in others, but it seems like we're often taught that if God is good, we can never be sad, or if God is in control, we can never have a bad day. And that just even negates the whole verse that people point to. We do grieve as those who have hope, but inherent in the verse is we're allowed to grieve. And so I think one thing that we can do right now and need to do, to Emily's point, not just to model Christianity, but is to find ourselves and let ourselves go, hey, there's a yearning in us for brokenness to be restored. We're ministers of reconciliation. That's a core thing to the Christian life. We yearn for relationships that are mandated to be separate, and rightly so right now. But we should long for those to be able to come back together again. We should mourn and grieve death, not just from a humanist side of things. As followers of Jesus, we have more of a reason to grieve death for those who don't know Jesus, especially, than for even the most humanist of humanists. And so just being able to be okay and bring whatever emotion, whatever feeling, whatever soul longing and brokenness that we have to be able to bring those to God is, I think, a very, very little talked about element of how we can model faith. Because we do grieve and we do mourn, but we mourn differently and we grieve differently. And we grieve with the hope and trust that this crazy thing we believe, that the resurrection actually does change everything, like you preached on Sunday and Joel just recapped for us. We believe that is true, not just on Easter, but we believe that is true in the best of our days and on holiday and when life is normal and everybody's healthy and good. And we also believe that the same Jesus went to the same cross and overcame the same death and promised us the same hope on our worst of days. And so he's not just on the mountaintops, he's with us in the valley of the shadow of death. And so what does it look like to be the church? It's grieving and being okay with our grief, but also finding hope in our grief and realizing the presence of God, not just in our good moments, but also in the hardest moments that we're facing. And in our yearnings and in our longings. I think that one of the things that can be forgotten right now is that truth that the perfect life and sacrificial death and miraculous resurrection and promised return of Jesus, like the truths that change all of our lives, like those impact. We talk about this a lot with our churches, right? Like the gospel changes every thought and every action, and it impacts the goals that we pursue and the way we define success. And of course it forgives sin, and of course it redeems us, but it's also impacting every moment of our present life. it seems like for many folks, there's a temptation to kind of put that on the shelf and say the gospel impacts every moment of our life when life is normal. But does the gospel still impact life when life is hard? And so does the fact that Jesus promises to be a better hope, does that still work when all the other places we're putting our hope seem to be failing us? Do we actually train? Have we actually trained our hearts and our minds and our communities to trust that Jesus is a better hope when we actually need hope, or is it just this ethereal thing that we kind of talk about sometimes? Is Jesus truly the source of joy to those who feel joyless? Is he still the answer to those who feel lonely? Is he still the life when people are afraid of death right now? Is he still the one that we say, yeah, I don't have to be in control because I trust that there is one who's in far better control than I could ever be. And so a lot of, I think, being the church in this moment is remembering things that we talk about in quote unquote normal time and go, hey, we can either leave those behind or we can see that as a rehearsal for when things are really bad. Yeah. And then being able to shepherd each other and kind of going, I get that there's fear. And some of the most trite phrases that have come out of Christian communities are people just posting on Facebook or just, saying, don't fear. Don't worry. And those are biblical things, sure, but without the context, it's just behavior modification. You can't conjure up a lack of fear, right? If you got to flesh out the rest of the verse, why do you not worry? Why do you take courage? Because the Lord is with you wherever you go. What's the only thing that'll get me to feel like I can release control and not have to figure everything out, which is where my own heart and mind goes. I feel like if I can just get all the facts in order and order my life, then I can be in control again. Then I'm at peace. Turns out in a global pandemic, I'm not able to do that. But the only thing that can make me loosen control is to realize that the same God who's in control of the rest of life has control now as well. And only then can I find better rest. So it's just asking the question, how does the gospel apply? What does Jesus model? What are the promises of God that he proved most fully in Jesus's life and death and resurrection and return, that can give us hope and give us promise and give us joy and give us the things that we feel like we lack, rather than finding them elsewhere. Yeah, really good. Thanks, Ben. That's a really great message. As we finish up, the last question I have is what is this call to action for Christians? What would be the message you want to leave them with today? The last thing you want to say to Christians today? Joel, can we start with you? What is it that you'd really like to say to Christians today watching this?
Christ is an anchor through storms. It's actually, anchor was one of the first Christian symbols rather than a cross. I think what we've touched on today is the fact that the storms come in various ways and various severities, but the hope in Jesus outlasts those storms. That's the anchor. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so true, so true. Hey, Ben, what do you want to leave us with today?
Yeah, I think, back to your first question, how can we the church? I think I would want to leave us with the reminder that every Christian has the Spirit of God living and active inside of us, and we all get to both. That lets us both rest and abide in Him, but it also means that we have access to go, God, what would you have me do today? Who would you have me pray for? Who would you have me serve? Is there an open door you want me to walk through to share a good word with someone, whether they're a fellow follower of Jesus or a neighbor who's been so anti-God, but might have a ripened soft heart right now. And just that even in that, his strength is made perfect in our weakness. So we don't know what we're doing in a global pandemic, but being able to say, I don't know, but God does know, is something that the Spirit inside of us frees us to admit.
Yeah, amen. Emily, what would you like to leave us with today?
Just a few things. Firstly, on a practical note, I think it's really important that we recognise the hardship of getting through days and days and days, often in the company of people who are frustrating or irritating after being with them for long periods of time. So I think for me, having done this kind of thing before, it's really important that we focus on not sweating the small stuff. So don't bear a grudge. Don't try to follow up that argument. Just let it go, because ultimately it really doesn't matter. I know it's easier said than done, but in that mindset of moment by moment, really just you can feel the anger or the irritation or the frustration, and just pause, close your eyes, and look to Jesus and let it go, because that's the only way that you'll get through this with relationships intact. And like Ben was saying before, the other thing is that discomfort is okay. People in countries where there is not a good healthcare system, where there's no running clean water, there's no electricity, they're used to sitting in discomfort. We're not so much. We have everything at our convenience. And I think it's important that we remember that suffering, discomfort is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, because remember that we're told that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. And that's something that's been really important to me, because often when I'm uncomfortable, my weaker traits come out, or I do get frustrated or down or disheartened. And I feel like that loss of control has meant that things are I'm not achieving anything anymore. I'm not being productive. But God's power is evident when we are weak and when we are out of control. So if we're uncomfortable and we're not doing what we think we should be doing, we just need to look to that hope and realize that just be Jesus in that situation, and his power will be made perfect in that moment. And that's all we can do. And that's how we can be a light in the darkness for other people at this time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks so much. Hey, thanks for having you all on Disciples in the Shed today. A really, really powerful message coming out of this, that we have a great hope in Jesus. Emily, thank you for your time. Ben, thanks for your time. We know you've just got your kids to bed over there, Ben, so it's a strange time for you. But we really appreciate both you and Emily taking your time out. Joel, thanks for being with us, as always. And Emily, would you finish up by praying for us that we would be filled with the hope of Jesus?
Sure. Heavenly Father, thank you so much that we can come together today. We can talk about your church in these strange times when we're all physically isolated. I pray that you'd speak to those who are really struggling right now, who are struggling with in unsafe homes perhaps, or with difficult personalities in their homes, or being very financially worried if they've lost their jobs. Lord, I pray that you just make your presence felt to those people. Give them the energy they need to get through each day. I pray that you'd bring peace into the households. I pray, Lord, that your power and might would be made perfect in this situation. I pray that people would be able to look to you and put their hopes in you. And Lord, I pray especially that we as a church will be able to reach out to those who need you, who need to know your love and who need to know your light at the moment. I pray for our leaders, and I pray for healing for those who are struggling, and I pray that your sovereignty will come, Lord, that you'll make that abundantly known to everyone. And I pray that, Lord, that you give us joy in each circumstance. In your name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, guys.